Hey guys, I'm Meg. This is Leveling Up on Life, and today I thought we could talk about emotions and what they even are, why we even feel them, and maybe what to do about them as we move through them. So, let's dive into all the feels. I have been thinking a lot lately about how emotions are just so prevalent all the time, and they're just in us. And I personally have struggled with knowing my emotion, expressing that emotion appropriately, in a way that aligns with the actual emotion, and also I think just being able to name emotions, I think has been a struggle that I have been working through maybe for most of my life. You can ask anyone I grew up with, probably mostly my sister. But one of the main emotions that I ever knew how to feel was anger. It was like every emotion bubbled up as anger rather than maybe how it should have been expressed. And feeling the feelings was really hard for me. It was hard for me to sit in my feelings. They all felt very heavy. And so I think the only thing that felt safe was to show anger. And so one of the processes I've had to go through is learning what the different emotions are, what they really mean, where they're rooted, and then how to properly express them. Trust me, anger's still there, but it's no longer the only thing that I show. And I think that it's really important to show the value of all the myriad emotions that we incur on a daily basis. And I also think that it's really important to recognize that we're in an onslaught of information all the time. And so sometimes emotions may come up that may not be accurate. They may not align to what you're truly feeling because they may come from something that's more from a place of overwhelm and informational overload rather than the true space of emotional capacity. And so I think one thing that was really, really important for me, yeah, this may be a little cliche, was I started therapy. And I started therapy at a time in my life where I was just like a complete upheaval. I was coming out of the end of a marriage. I was living alone in a small city. And I mean, I wouldn't even maybe call it a city, town. And I just felt very alone. So starting therapy was really the first place where I was able to sit down with someone, say what I was thinking and feeling. It was done in a safe space, and it was done in a way where all of those feelings and all those thoughts were in some way validated. I was not wrong for thinking and feeling any of the things. It was just figuring out where they were coming from. No thoughts and feelings are necessarily wrong. It's just whether or not they're coming from the right place and whether or not we act upon them. And so I think one thing that was really important for me to realize is that all of these things are happening in ebbs and flows. And I can remember my college soccer coach. He used to always say that the ebbs and flows of life are where the beauty lies. And I think he was probably talking about the ebbs and flows of soccer, but I'm going to attribute it to life here. And he is right. Like, things are going to ebb and flow, they're going to change. And one thing that I have consistently struggled with is just feeling stuck in one place, one feeling, one place and time, one job, one relationship that maybe I didn't want to be in. And so, this recognition that feelings ebb and flow, they come and go, you won't feel this way forever, um, was really important for me to come to grips with. I'm old enough now to see the cycle that life sometimes goes through, and I don't know if this is true for everyone, but looking back, life is very cyclical. I guess this kind of correlates to the ebb and flow. You know, things come and go, and I think our ability to navigate it coming and what that means when it's present, and then to also navigate the leaving of that thing or that person or that relationship or that era of your life. I think doing so with lots of grace for yourself is really important. And therapy is something that allowed me to do that, mostly because it allowed me to externally process my feelings. That's something that I hadn't really had a place for that before. And I find that extremely valuable even to this day. I mean, I literally just got off a therapy phone call. So, um, you can ask my current partner. He literally said to me the other day, "When's the last time you talked to your therapist?" Because I externally process so often, sometimes with him, sometimes with friends, sometimes with parents, sometimes with my sister. But that's something that's really valuable, is for me to be able to like talk through what I'm thinking and feeling in order to recognize either its power or its weakness, right? Like, is this important? Is this what I really think and feel? Or is this just kind of like a fleeting perspective that isn't really that powerful and doesn't impact me that much? And therapy was allowing this deeper insight to come in and to find the roots of those thoughts and feelings and kind of the connection between the circumstances of life and why I was feeling the way that I was feeling. And up until that point, I hadn't really had that experience. It was just kind of something you like bucked up to, hence maybe why the anger was the only emotion that I expressed. Novel concept there. And I think this one time, I've done hot yoga more than once, like 3 times, but this one time was in a hot yoga class, and the yogi, is that the yoga teacher? Is that what the name of them? She said that this takes a little bit of struggle, a little bit of grace. And in that moment, that hit me as such a powerful statement, because that is so life giving, right? Like, a little bit of struggle, a little bit of grace. That is literally what day in, day out we should be doing. Sometimes it's going to be a struggle, sometimes it's going to be grace, sometimes it's going to be a lot of both. But regardless, our ability to kind of like sit through the struggle, sit through the feelings, give ourselves grace, and recognize the space that they're coming from. I think that's a really important aspect, and that's something that therapy gave me. I also recognize that therapy, A, isn't for everyone, right? Like, there are people who either don't want to do therapy, which is totally valid, or have and it didn't work, or may not afford it because it is so expensive in some circumstances. So, I wanted to go into maybe some things that could be helpful outside of therapy to help kind of process emotions and get out of kind of the rumination of some feelings that seem to take over. The first thing I would say is to develop a practice of just noticing emotions. I think a lot of times we have this stigma where we label emotions either good or bad, and they're neither, right? Like, we have this lexicon that we've developed in our society, and we have these charged words, and that's not necessarily true. Emotions are neither good or bad, but it is important that we notice them. And I remember my therapist told me this practice to do whenever emotions were kind of getting the best of me. And it's something that I used. I had this flight to Zimbabwe, which I was so lucky to go to Zimbabwe for a teaching trip. It was incredible. On the flight, I had just ended a relationship, and the night before, they had posted a picture of them and their new partner, and it was just very out of the blue, very fast. And so it struck me, and I was very affected by this. And here I am on this flight to a whole nother country, this super long flight, and my emotions are getting the best of me. So much so that in the airport, I called my therapist before, like freaking out. And she told me to try to get back into my body whenever all of these emotions were taking over. And something she said that ended up being really helpful, it sounded silly when she said it, but it was so helpful, is to start naming the colors of things as you look around the room. So, green leaf, brown shoes, white soccer ball. Yes, those are things in my house. The soccer ball is in my house. But do that. And what it does is it kind of forces you to come back into your body rather than your emotions, just kind of ruminating and controlling all of your perspectives. And I did that probably, I mean, upwards of 25 times on that flight. Um, but I ultimately realized the power of kind of controlling that perspective, bringing it back into your body, and realizing that you are not your emotions, being able to regulate that emotional impulse to feel all the feelings. And frankly, in that moment, they were overwhelming me. It was too much feeling and not the space to feel it. I wish I had that perspective earlier in life because I really think that it would have helped me kind of overcome a lot of my emotional reactions to things, to people, to places, to sounds. Um, and it really is powerful in allowing the emotions to move through you and to recognize that you have power over them. Another thing that was really helpful for me to kind of tag into this is if we're going to notice emotions, then we have to know what we're feeling. And for me, seeing an emotions wheel, which you can Google, it's pretty easy to find. But all of these emotions that we feel that we may not even know that we feel or have a name for, and just being able to name them is so powerful. Being like, oh, this is envy. Oh, I'm feeling a little bit of stagnation. Is that an emotion? It is now. I'm naming it one. Just being able to name it is kind of giving yourself power over it. And that is super helpful in noticing them. The second thing I would say that is really helpful in kind of working through these emotions is a regular journaling practice. And I know we're not all writers, trust me. My English students will remind me for years that we not all like to write. Heard. However, I think that externally processing emotion, whether that be through pen and paper, whether that be digitally typing them out, whether that be through a voice memo, but working them through your brain and out of you, there's so much strength in that too, because rather than them sitting in your brain and you holding them in that space and ruminating over them, you process them through your writing or through your words. And that output provides space for them to kind of work themselves through what you're thinking and feeling. And a lot of times, again, it kind of takes your power back. You're able to read over it or listen to it back and realize that, okay, what I'm thinking and feeling is accurate. However, they're just thoughts and feelings. They do not make me who I am. And this is the space that I'm giving those thoughts and feelings. And I'm going to move on and leave them here. And that's something that's been really helpful for me is just being able to kind of export them. And I know that I'm an external processor and maybe that has a lot to do with it, but I also think that just kind of working them through, I don't know if that's neurological or psychological, but I've just found it to be really helpful when you're feeling stuck in emotions or stuck in any sort of thought process. The third thing that I would say was super helpful and probably the most difficult is fully expressing emotions in spaces that are safe, allowing yourself to be fully vulnerable and truly say what you think and feel. And it is through that practiced effort that we realize that those thoughts and feelings are valid and they do belong. And I think a lot of times for me, it was whether or not they were right. Should I be feeling this? And being able to show up as your whole self and be accepted by other people, regardless of your thoughts, regardless of your feelings, that gives so much undeniable presence to your being that you, over time, the more that you do this, you just learn to be safe in yourself. It's validation to your true sense of self because you know what you're thinking and feeling. You're expressing those thoughts and feelings openly with other humans who are also accepting them. And the more that you do that, the more that you realize that that's kind of a safe understanding of who you are. And I think that allows you to really blossom into a deeper sense of self, which frankly I don't see as a way could ever be harmful. I think understanding yourself and being able to truly express who you are, um, especially in a safe way, I think that has a lot of really deep connection to us moving towards our better selves. The fourth and last way, again, not an easy one, that I think that we can help move through our emotional state outside of therapy is, and it might sound cliche, but to choose to be our own stability, to really show up for ourselves. And I know that's like really layered, but to realize that you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, and you get to choose your reaction to all of those things. I think, again, over time, the more that you show up for yourself in that way, you recognize your thoughts, you recognize your feelings, you realize you are not them, and you choose your path forward, knowing, acknowledging your thoughts and feelings. I think that that's a really transformative art that can pay off dividends each time you do it. And I know for me, I have had a struggle with kind of finding myself among my thoughts and my feelings and other people's thoughts and feelings. I'm hyper aware of everything going on around me, likely hyper vigilant, but I think it's really difficult, especially when we, like I mentioned earlier, have this onslaught of information almost incessantly from our phones, from the TV, from devices, from music, from external sounds, all of the factors that can like impact our nervous systems. I think it's really powerful to be able to turn into yourself and to know I am thinking and feeling this way, and this is how I'm going to choose to react. And so claiming that space for yourself and choosing to be your biggest supporter, regardless of your truth, I think that creates an understanding and where we are our own safety. We don't need necessarily the acknowledgement of safety from everyone else around us because we know that we're safe in ourselves. I think this kind of aligns to the whole, again, count, kind of cliche, count to 10 concept. I don't know, like I think my grandmother, mom probably like it told me when I was upset to count to 10 right before she would force us to give each other hugs when we were angry at each other, me and my sister. But I think counting to 10 is the thing that gives you the space, right? Like that's the goal. Sometimes for me, it might be more like 100, but the space to be like, okay, this is the reality of what I'm thinking and feeling. I am not my reactions. I get to choose my reactions and choosing to be your own stability and all of that. I think there's a really impactful, both short term and long term, the more that you do that, that can really be transformative in how you recognize and show up for your own thoughts and emotions. The last thing I want to say, and I have tried to embrace this perspective, and it's honestly been life changing. We're all in our feels. Like we're all in it. We're deep up in the feels. And I think recognizing that and realizing that very little what anybody else does is really about us. It's about them. They're in their thoughts, they're in their feelings. That's their chosen reaction. They chose that reaction. You didn't make them react that way. You didn't make them feel that way. You didn't make them think that. Most, if not all, of what people do is about them. It's not about you. And on the same token, what you do is not about them. It's about you. And I think if I would have had that perspective much earlier in my life, I wouldn't have reacted much of the way that I reacted because it would have been a choice rather than a true reaction. It was often diabolical and ridiculous. However, a reaction nonetheless. I was reacting. I was acting upon something that someone else did to me rather than actually acting for myself. And realizing that that person has their own thoughts and feelings, and that has very little to do with me. There is so much that I gain from that perspective, and kind of going throughout my day and the little moments when I get that like quippy little email from that person, or whenever the text comes through and it's really terse, or whenever someone is skipping down the street and they look weird. All of that is about them. They're having a day. That is their day. And they're reacting to their day and their thoughts and their emotions, just like we are. And I think moving through life with kind of the power of our own emotions, but also realizing that other people have the power over theirs and much of what they're doing is about them. I think that that's a really, really lovely way to start to perceive the things that go on outside of us and the things that go on within us. We're all just doing the best we can. And sometimes that's easier than other times. Sometimes that's really freaking difficult. But regardless, day in, day out, we have to choose to be gracious with ourselves because life is really about learning and progress. And sometimes it's about moving backwards. Sometimes it's about taking a step back and realizing that there is something to learn through all of this. And I truly think that long term, we see benefits from befriending our emotions, from making them something that we notice and something that we take care of rather than something that we stuff down and try to hide. And I also think there is a lot of value in pushing yourself to find other people in this world, in your space, who are willing to also show up that way. Find that sense of community with people who are also willing to be vulnerable. And that may not be in your direct circle. That might be something you have to truly seek out. And I've been there and I've done that. And I can say that the fruits of that labor have long surpassed any effort that I put in trying to find my people. I find that to be one of the most impactful things in my life right now, is having people who I can be vulnerable with and show up as my true self. It feels lovely. So keep doing the best you can and realize that we're all just doing the same. Feel those emotions.